This document chronicles the extraordinary events that led to a fundamental reassessment of human military capabilities and the subsequent integration of Terran forces into galactic defense protocols. What began as routine military exercises revealed the devastating effectiveness of what humans dismissively call basic training, forcing a complete revision of our understanding of combat readiness across known species. The phrase, "the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," emerged from human philosophical traditions but has become the unofficial motto of the Terran Integration Program, representing a fundamental shift in how we approach military preparation across the galaxy. Art 1. Initial contact and preconceptions. The first documented interaction between human military forces and established galactic powers occurred during what the Confederation of Allied Worlds termed a routine capability assessment on the neutral world of Kepler. 442b. The human delegation, representing the recently contacted Sol system, had been invited to observe standard military exercises as part of their integration process into galactic society. Admiral Zakthov of the Reptilian Hegemony, commanding officer of the assessment, later filed the initial report that would become legendary throughout military academies across 17 star systems. His preliminary observations noted that the human delegation appeared remarkably unprepared for serious military engagement, citing their primitive kinetic weapons, inadequate protective systems, and concerning lack of enhancement technologies. The humans had arrived with what they called a standard infantry unit, 32 individuals equipped with what galactic standards considered antique projectile weapons, basic communication devices, and protective gear that analysis suggested could barely withstand a glancing blow from modern energy weapons. The delegation was led by Colonel Sarah Chen, a veteran of what humans called their special forces, though her credentials seemed unremarkable compared to the genetically enhanced, cybernetically augmented, and technologically superior warriors present from other species. The Zephyrian Collective's representative war singer Velnath, whose species had dominated ground combat for 3 millennia through their natural psychic abilities and crystalline exoskeletons, openly questioned why the humans had been included in the assessment at all. The Velkari Federation's prime combat unit Thexmor, standing nearly 3 meters tall with reinforced bone structure and integrated weapon systems, suggested that the humans might serve better in support roles rather than frontline combat. What none of these established military powers understood was the fundamental difference in how humans approached warfare, and more crucially, how they prepared for it. The human concept of basic training represented something entirely foreign to species that relied on genetic superiority, technological augmentation, or natural evolutionary advantages. While other species enhanced their warriors through external means, humans had developed something far more disturbing: a systematic process of breaking down and rebuilding the fundamental psychological and physical structure of their soldiers. Colonel Chen's briefing to the assembled military leaders revealed the first hints of what was to come. She spoke of stress inoculation, pain tolerance conditioning, and psychological resilience training, as if these were routine procedures. When asked about the humans' apparent technological disadvantages, she simply stated that superior equipment means nothing if the warrior breaks under pressure. The assembled alien commanders exchanged what they believed were knowing glances. Here was another species that had confused bravado with capability, primitive thinking with tactical innovation. They had seen this before: young species that compensated for technological limitations with chest beating and aggressive posturing. It never ended well for them. Warsinger Velnath's psychic abilities allowed her to sense the emotional states of the human soldiers. What she detected confused her initially. There was no fear, no anxiety about the coming exercises, but also no overconfidence or bravado. Instead, she sensed something she had never encountered before: a cold, calculating readiness that seemed to exist independently of the specific threats they might face. The humans appeared to be in a constant state of prepared alertness, as if they had already accepted the possibility of death and moved beyond it to focus on mission completion. Prime Combat Unit Thaxmor, whose species had evolved from apex predators on a world where only the strongest survived, found himself oddly disturbed by the humans' casual demeanor. His people understood violence as a natural expression of dominance, a tool for establishing hierarchy and claiming resources. But the humans displayed none of the typical pre-combat behaviors he recognized. No territorial posturing, no dominance displays, no emotional preparation for violence. They simply waited. Admiral Zaxia's species, the Saurian Collective, had built their military doctrine around careful planning, technological superiority, and overwhelming force. Their warriors were enhanced with combat stimulants, equipped with energy shields and plasma weapons, and trained from birth in tactical theory. The idea that any species could compete with such advantages using what appeared to be primitive tools and raw determination seemed absurd. The initial combat scenario was designed as a standard urban warfare simulation. Mixed teams would be tasked with securing a mock-up city while defending against automated threats and opposing forces. The rules were simple. Use of lethal force was prohibited, but all other tactical options were available. The scenario typically lasted 6 to 8 hours and served as an excellent benchmark for comparing military capabilities across species. The human team was assigned to what was considered the most challenging sector, a maze of narrow streets and multi-story buildings that favored defenders and made the humans' technological disadvantages even more pronounced. The commanding officers from other species privately agreed that this would be an excellent opportunity to demonstrate the importance of proper military development to this newcomer species. What they failed to anticipate was that every human soldier had been conditioned through years of training that made this scenario seem routine rather than challenging. Human basic training, as Colonel Chen had tried to explain, was not simply about learning to use weapons or follow orders. It was a comprehensive psychological reconstruction process that began with the systematic destruction of civilian comfort zones and ended with the creation of individuals who could function effectively under any conceivable stress condition. The physical conditioning alone was extraordinary by galactic standards. While other species relied on genetic enhancement or technological augmentation, humans pushed their unmodified bodies through conditioning regimens that bordered on torture. They carried crushing loads over impossible distances, functioned without sleep for days at a time, and endured environmental conditions that would incapacitate most other species. But the psychological conditioning was even more remarkable. Human military training included deliberate exposure to every form of stress, fear, and discomfort that could be safely simulated. Soldiers were trained to function while hungry, exhausted, in pain, disoriented, and under direct threat of death. They learned to make complex decisions while experiencing conditions that would cause most sentient beings to collapse into catatonic shock. Perhaps most importantly, human training emphasized adaptability and improvisation over technological dependence. While other species learned to operate specific systems and follow established protocols, humans were trained to accomplish missions regardless of equipment failures, communication breakdowns, or tactical surprise. They learned to use any available resources as weapons, to navigate by multiple methods, and to maintain unit cohesion even when separated from command structure. As the exercise began, the assembled alien commanders settled in to observe what they expected to be an educational demonstration of why technological advancement was crucial for modern warfare. Instead, they were about to witness the first example of what would later be termed human tactical chaos, the disturbing ability of Terran forces to succeed through methods that defied conventional military logic. The human team entered their assigned sector with no apparent strategy beyond basic fire and movement tactics that seemed centuries out of date. They used hand signals instead of encrypted communications, carried primitive maps instead of holographic displays, and moved with a patient deliberation that suggested they were either supremely confident or completely unprepared for serious opposition. Within the first hour, it became clear that something was fundamentally wrong with the alien commander's assumptions about human capability. Part 2. The exercise that changed everything. The urban warfare simulation began at 0600 Standard Galactic Time, with all participating units deploying to their assigned sectors. Initial monitoring showed expected patterns. The Zephyrian collective forces established psychic command networks and began systematic building clearance. The Valkyrie Federation units used their superior physical capabilities to secure high ground positions, and the Saurian forces deployed sensor networks and heavy weapons platforms at strategic choke points. The human team's approach appeared chaotic by comparison. They moved through their assigned sector using techniques that seemed to prioritize stealth over speed, spending what observers considered excessive time on reconnaissance before advancing. Their communication discipline was absolute. They maintained radio silence except for brief coded transmissions that revealed nothing about their intentions or positions. Admiral Zakhtar noted in his real-time observations that the humans seemed to be wasting valuable time on unnecessary precautions, while Warsing of Velnath reported that her psychic scanning could detect no human presence despite knowing their approximate location. This anomaly was initially attributed to primitive mental discipline rather than any sophisticated countermeasure. The first significant engagement occurred when a Valkyrie patrol encountered what appeared to be two human soldiers moving through an abandoned marketplace. The Valkyrie, confident in their superior speed and strength, moved to capture what they assumed would be easy targets. The engagement lasted exactly 17 seconds. When the dust settled, 4 Valkyrie warriors, each standing nearly 3 meters tall and armed with advanced energy weapons, had been neutralized by 2 humans using kinetic rifles and what the post-action analysis described as in private explosive devices constructed from available materials. The humans had vanished before reinforcements could arrive, leaving behind only evidence of their presence and the stunned realization that they had somehow anticipated the patrol's approach despite having no apparent sensor technology. Prime Combat Unit Dexmore immediately ordered increased caution and began treating the humans as a legitimate threat rather than an amusing sideshow. His decision proved wise when his own forces encountered what they initially dismissed as a lone human sniper operating from a partially collapsed building. The engagement escalated when Valkyrie attempts to use overwhelming force to eliminate the position resulted in coordinated ambushes from multiple concealed locations. What the monitoring commanders were witnessing was the practical application of human tactical doctrine that had been developed through centuries of conflict on a world that had produced warfare as a constant state rather than an occasional necessity. Earth's history of continuous military evolution had created a species that approached combat not as a contest between equals but as a problem to be solved through any available means. The humans were not trying to fight fairly or demonstrate superior individual capability. They were methodically dismantling their opposition through techniques that exploited fundamental assumptions about how civilized warfare should be conducted. When Zephyrian forces attempted to establish psychic command networks, they found their mental communications disrupted by what appeared to be random interference. Post-exercise analysis revealed that the humans had been using primitive radio equipment to broadcast white noise on frequencies that somehow interfered with psychic abilities. A countermeasure that should have been impossible without understanding Zephyrian neural structure. Colonel Chen later explained that human military doctrine included preparation for unknown threat parameters, and that generating broad-spectrum interference was a standard countermeasure against any form of exotic communication. The humans had not specifically targeted Zephyrian psychic abilities, they had simply implemented procedures designed to disrupt any communication method they did not understand. The Saurian forces, with their advanced sensor networks and overwhelming firepower, should have dominated any engagement with the technologically primitive humans. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to appear from nowhere, strike with devastating effectiveness, and vanish before retaliation was possible. The humans had identified the Saurian reliance on their sensor networks as a critical vulnerability and had systematically eliminated each detection node using techniques that ranged from long-range precision shooting to improvised explosive devices placed with impossible stealth. When the Saurians attempted to establish new sensor positions, they discovered that the humans had somehow mapped every possible emplacement and were prepared with countermeasures. War Singer Velnath's growing frustration led to increasingly aggressive tactics as her forces attempted to corner and eliminate the human team through brute force. Her warriors, enhanced with crystalline armor and armed with energy weapons that could cut through most known materials, should have been invulnerable to kinetic projectiles and primitive explosives. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to understand their capabilities better than they did. Human marksmen targeted the joints and interfaces in Zephyrian armor with precision that suggested detailed knowledge of design flaws. Explosive devices were placed to maximize psychological impact rather than physical damage, creating noise and confusion that disrupted Zephyrian concentration and interfered with their psychic abilities. Most disturbing was the realization that the humans were not fighting to win in any conventional sense. They were fighting to teach a lesson about the fundamental nature of warfare itself. As the exercise progressed, it became clear that the human team was operating with a level of coordination that should have been impossible without advanced communication technology. Individual soldiers moved as if guided by perfect intelligence about enemy positions and intentions, yet monitoring equipment detected no transmissions between them. Their tactics showed evidence of real-time adaptation to changing conditions, but their command structure appeared to be entirely decentralized. Admiral Zach ordered a complete review of monitoring equipment, convinced that some form of advanced human technology was being overlooked. The investigation revealed that the humans were using methods so primitive that they had been dismissed as irrelevant. Hand signals, predetermined rally points, and tactical procedures so thoroughly drilled that each soldier could anticipate his companion's actions without direct communication. The alien commanders were witnessing the practical result of training methodologies that treated technological failure as a routine operational challenge rather than a mission-ending catastrophe. Human soldiers had been conditioned to function as effective combat units even when separated, out of communication, and operating with minimal equipment. By the fourth hour of the exercise, the established military powers were no longer confident about the outcome. The humans had systematically neutralized nearly 40% of the opposing forces while suffering minimal casualties themselves. Their tactics showed no respect for conventional military hierarchy. Individual soldiers made independent decisions that somehow coordinated into effective unit actions. Prime Combat Unit Thexmore, whose species had dominated ground warfare for millennia through superior individual capability, found himself facing an enemy that seemed to treat superior capability as just another tactical problem to be solved. Human soldiers did not attempt to match Valkyri's strength or speed. Instead, they used techniques that made those advantages irrelevant. When Valkyrie warriors attempted to use their superior mobility to outflank human positions, they discovered that every possible approach had been anticipated and prepared with obstacles, traps, or ambush positions. When they tried to use brute force to break through human defensive positions, they found themselves facing coordinated fire from multiple angles that had somehow appeared without any detectable movement. The humans were not fighting as individuals enhanced by training and equipment. They were fighting as a single organism that happened to be distributed across multiple bodies, each component capable of independent action but all working toward unified objectives through methods that seemed to border on telepathy. Warsinger Velnath's psychic abilities, which should have provided overwhelming intelligence advantages, proved useless against an enemy that seemed to have no emotional responses to exploit. Human soldiers showed no fear when outnumbered, no frustration when plans failed, no anger when companions were eliminated. They simply adapted and continued mission execution with mechanical efficiency that was somehow more disturbing than any display of courage or determination. The breakthrough moment came when Admiral Zax attempted to use his force's technological advantages to establish a decisive engagement. Saurian heavy weapons platforms were deployed to eliminate what sensor data suggested was the primary human defensive position. The bombardment was precise and overwhelming. Nothing in the target area should have survived the concentrated energy discharge. When the smoke cleared, the position was empty. Not abandoned, empty. The humans had somehow anticipated the attack and withdrawn before it occurred, leaving behind carefully positioned reflective materials that had convinced Saurian sensors they were targeting occupied positions. The psychological impact on the attacking forces was immediate and devastating. They had used their most powerful weapons against an enemy that had simply stepped aside. The humans had not countered their technology or overwhelmed their defenses. They had made their advantages irrelevant through techniques so simple that they seemed like magic. Colonel Chen's voice came over the general communication channel for the first time since the exercise had begun. Her words were calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying to the assembled alien commanders. This concludes the demonstration phase. Beginning actual exercise now. The realization hit the alien forces simultaneously. Everything that had happened in the previous 4 hours had been the humans holding back, showing restraint, demonstrating their capabilities without committing to serious engagement. The systematic elimination of sensor networks, the precise ambushes, the impossible coordination, all of it had been accomplished by a human team that was not yet operating at full capacity. What followed would be remembered as the most comprehensive tactical defeat in recorded galactic military history, accomplished by a species using weapons and techniques that should have been obsolete by contemporary standards. Part 3. The Revelation and its Consequences. The final phase of the exercise lasted exactly 93 minutes and fundamentally altered galactic understanding of military capability. What the assembled alien commanders witnessed was not simply superior tactics or unexpected competence. It was a demonstration of warfare as practiced by a species that had evolved on what could only be described as a death world where survival required constant adaptation to impossibly hostile conditions. The humans' restraint during the initial hours had not been caution or defensive positioning. They had been conducting reconnaissance, identifying enemy capabilities, and preparing comprehensive countermeasures. When Colonel Chen announced the beginning of the actual exercise, the human team implemented a coordinated assault that treated the previous 4 hours of engagement as preliminary data collection. Admiral Zax's sensor networks, which had been gradually degraded throughout the exercise, failed completely within the first 10 minutes of renewed human activity. Post-analysis revealed that the humans had not simply destroyed the equipment, they had systematically compromised each sensor node using techniques that made the failures appear to be random malfunctions. Saurian command and control capabilities collapsed as their technological advantages became liabilities in an information-denied environment. The Valkyrie Federation forces, despite their superior physical capabilities and individual combat prowess, found themselves facing coordinated attacks that seemed to come from every direction simultaneously. Prime Combat Unit Thexmore later described the experience as fighting shadows that could kill. Human soldiers appeared from concealed positions, eliminated targets with precision marksmanship or close combat techniques, and vanished before counterattacks could be organized. Most disturbing was the realization that the humans were not simply using superior tactics. They were demonstrating a fundamental understanding of warfare that treated combat as a psychological exercise rather than a test of equipment or individual capability. Every action was designed to maximize enemy confusion and minimize their ability to respond effectively. Warsinger Velnath's psychic abilities, which should have provided comprehensive intelligence about human intentions and capabilities, proved to be a critical vulnerability rather than an advantage. The humans had somehow learned to exploit Zephyrian dependence on psychic communication by feeding false information through methods that remained unclear even after extensive post-exercise analysis. When Zephyrian forces attempted to coordinate responses to human attacks, they discovered that their mental communications were being manipulated in ways that should have been impossible. Orders were distorted, position reports were altered, and tactical information was corrupted by interference that seemed to target specific aspects of Zephyrian neural structure. Colonel Chen later revealed that human military training included extensive preparation for asymmetric threats, and that generating false psychic impressions was accomplished through techniques derived from human psychological warfare doctrine. The humans had not developed specific countermeasures against Zephyrian abilities. They had simply applied general principles for disrupting enemy communication and coordination. The systematic destruction of alien command structures was accomplished using techniques so fundamentally simple that they should have been easily countered by any competent military force. The humans used noise discipline, camouflage and movement techniques that required no technology beyond basic equipment and comprehensive training. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles that could be manufactured from available materials. Their explosives were improvised devices constructed using commercial chemicals and primitive electronics. What made these simple techniques devastatingly effective was the level of competence with which they were applied. Human soldiers demonstrated mastery of fundamental military skills that other species had abandoned in favor of technological solutions. They could navigate without electronic assistance, communicate without detectable transmissions, and coordinate complex operations without centralized command structures. Admiral Zach's forces attempted to adapt to human tactics by abandoning their reliance on sensors and engaging in direct visual combat. This approach played directly into human advantages. Every soldier had been trained in marksmanship techniques that treated individual accuracy as a fundamental military requirement rather than a specialized skill. The engagement ranges that seemed impossibly distant for kinetic weapons proved to be routine for human marksmen. Shots that required computational assistance for other species were accomplished using techniques that humans called basic rifle marksmanship. The precision and consistency of human shooting performance suggested enhancement technologies that monitoring equipment could not detect. Post-exercise medical analysis revealed that human soldiers showed no evidence of genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, or pharmaceutical augmentation. Their capabilities were the result of training methodologies that pushed unmodified biological systems to performance levels that exceeded what galactic science considered theoretically possible. The psychological impact of this realization was immediate and profound. Every established military power had based their doctrine on the assumption that technological advancement was essential for military effectiveness. The humans had demonstrated that properly applied training could produce capabilities that exceeded those achieved through genetic enhancement, cybernetic augmentation, and technological superiority combined. Warsinger Velnath's eventual surrender came after her forces had been reduced to less than 30% effective strength through systematic elimination that showed no mercy for individual capability or technological advantage. Her final transmission was a simple acknowledgement that Zephyrian military doctrine had been proved inadequate against an enemy that treated psychic abilities as just another tactical problem to be solved. Prime Combat Unit Thexmore's capitulation followed shortly afterward when his remaining forces found themselves surrounded by human positions that seemed to appear from nowhere. The Valkyrie warriors, despite their superior strength and speed, had been systematically outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter it with techniques that made their advantages irrelevant. Admiral Zakaf's final report noted that Saurian forces had been eliminated through methods that required no technology beyond what humans called basic infantry equipment. The systematic destruction of sensor networks, the precision of human marksmanship, and the effectiveness of improvised explosives had rendered Saurian technological advantages useless against an enemy that fought using principles that were centuries old by galactic standards but applied with competence that exceeded anything in recorded military history. The exercise officially ended when Colonel Chen's team had eliminated or neutralized 100% of opposing forces while suffering only minor casualties that had no impact on operational effectiveness. The time required for complete tactical victory was less than 6 hours total, with the final phase lasting under 2 hours. The post-exercise debrief became legendary throughout galactic military academies for the complete reversal of established assumptions about military capability. Admiral Zax's opening statement captured the magnitude of the revelation. "We came here expecting to demonstrate the importance of technological advancement to a primitive species. Instead, we have learned that we are the primitives." Colonel Chen's explanation of human military doctrine revealed the fundamental difference between Earth-based warfare and galactic military thinking. While other species had focused on enhancing individual capability through external means, humans had developed training methodologies that maximized the potential of unmodified biological systems through systematic conditioning that bordered on species modification. Human basic training was revealed to be a comprehensive reconstruction process that created individuals capable of functioning effectively under any conceivable operational condition. The physical conditioning alone exceeded what most species considered the maximum possible for unenhanced biology. The psychological conditioning created soldiers who could maintain tactical effectiveness while experiencing stress levels that would cause most sentients to become catatonic. Most importantly, human training emphasized adaptability and problem-solving over equipment dependence. While other species learned to operate specific systems according to established protocols, humans were conditioned to accomplish missions regardless of equipment failures, communication breakdowns, or tactical surprises. They learned to use any available resources as weapons, to navigate by multiple methods, and to maintain unit cohesion even when separated from command structures. The phrase, "the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," emerged from Colonel Chen's explanation of human military philosophy. She described a training process that systematically eliminated every form of comfort, convenience, and psychological security that could become a liability in combat situations. Human soldiers learned to function without external support systems because they had been conditioned to treat such dependencies as fundamental vulnerabilities. Warsinger Velnath's analysis of human psychological conditioning revealed techniques that bordered on torture by galactic standards but produced results that exceeded anything achievable through technological enhancement. Human soldiers were exposed to every form of stress, fear, and discomfort that could be safely simulated, then trained to maintain operational effectiveness while experiencing conditions that would incapacitate most other species. The systematic nature of human conditioning was perhaps most disturbing aspect of their military development. Every soldier had been subjected to identical training protocols that created standardized responses to tactical situations. This uniformity allowed for coordination without communication and tactical adaptation without centralized command, creating military units that functioned as distributed organisms rather than collections of individuals. Prime Combat Unit Dexmore's assessment focused on the practical implications of human capabilities for galactic military doctrine. He noted that every established tactical principle had been proved inadequate against an enemy that treated conventional military advantages as problems to be solved rather than insurmountable obstacles. The technological superiority that formed the foundation of galactic military power was revealed to be a critical vulnerability against enemies who were prepared to function without technological support. Human soldiers could accomplish missions using improvised equipment, navigate without electronic assistance, and coordinate complex operations using signals and techniques that required no technology beyond basic training. The integration of human military capabilities into galactic defense doctrine became an immediate priority following the exercise results. The Confederation of Allied Worlds commissioned comprehensive studies of human training methodologies, with the goal of adapting their techniques for use by other species. Initial attempts to replicate human conditioning protocols proved unsuccessful due to fundamental biological and psychological differences between species. What worked for humans Systematic exposure to extreme stress and discomfort proved to be destructive rather than conditioning for other species. The genetic and cultural adaptations that made humans capable of surviving their own training methods were apparently unique among known sentient species. The solution emerged through collaboration between human military specialists and galactic xenobiological experts. Rather than attempting to replicate human training methods directly, Allied forces began developing species-specific conditioning protocols that achieved similar results through approaches adapted to different biological and psychological structures. The Zephyrian Collective developed enhanced psychic discipline techniques that improved mental resilience and reduced dependence on technological communication systems. The Valkyrie Federation implemented physical conditioning programs that maximized their natural strength and speed advantages, while reducing reliance on equipment that could be compromised or destroyed. The Saurian forces, with their emphasis on technological superiority, proved most resistant to adaptation, but eventually developed training protocols that emphasized equipment-independent capabilities alongside their traditional technological advantages. The integration was successful enough that Saurian forces began incorporating human-developed techniques for navigation, communication, and improvised weapons construction. The establishment of joint human-alien training programs became a cornerstone of galactic military development. Human instructors were assigned to Allied forces to provide training in Deathworld combat techniques, methods developed on a planet where survival required constant adaptation to impossibly hostile conditions. These programs revealed that the fundamental difference between human military capability and that of other species lay not in superior individual capacity, but in training methodologies that treated technological failure as a routine operational challenge rather than a mission-ending catastrophe. Human soldiers were conditioned to accomplish objectives regardless of equipment availability, communication status, or tactical surprise. The psychological impact of human military capabilities extended far beyond tactical considerations. The demonstration that properly applied training could produce results that exceeded technological enhancement forced a complete re-evaluation of military development priorities throughout the galaxy. Species that had invested millennia in genetic modification programs began questioning whether their approaches had been fundamentally flawed. The realization that humans achieved superior military effectiveness through training methods that any species could theoretically implement challenged basic assumptions about the relationship between technology and capability. The cultural implications were equally profound. Human military philosophy emphasized individual responsibility, adaptive thinking, and mission accomplishment through any available means. These concepts were alien to species that had developed military doctrines based on technological superiority, genetic advantages, or specialized capabilities. The integration of human perspectives into galactic military thinking required fundamental changes in how other species approached warfare and military preparation. The concept of systematic conditioning to eliminate psychological and physical vulnerabilities was revolutionary for species that had focused on enhancement rather than optimization of existing capabilities. The long-term consequences of the Kepler 442b exercise continued to influence galactic military development. Human training methodologies have been adapted for use by 17 different species, creating allied forces that combine technological advantages with the adaptive capabilities that make humans so formidable in combat. The phrase, "the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," has become an unofficial motto for integrated military units throughout the galaxy. It represents the fundamental insight that superior capability emerges not from technological enhancement or genetic advantage, but from systematic elimination of dependencies that become vulnerabilities under stress. The transformation of galactic military doctrine from technology-dependent to adaptability-focused has created allied forces capable of operating effectively under any conceivable conditions. The integration of human-developed techniques with species-specific advantages has produced military capabilities that exceed anything achievable by individual species operating independently. The exercise that began as a routine capability assessment has become the foundational event for modern galactic military cooperation. The lesson learned was not that humans were superior warriors, but that the systematic development of adaptive capabilities through comprehensive conditioning could produce results that exceeded any technological advantage. The document concludes with Admiral Zaxeth's final assessment, which has become required reading for military commanders throughout the galaxy. We learned that day that true military strength comes not from the weapons we carry or the enhancements we possess, but from our ability to accomplish missions when all external advantages have been stripped away. The humans showed us that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is a mind that has been systematically freed from every dependency that could become a vulnerability. This is the lesson of the Deathworld species, not that they are superior to us, but that we can become superior to ourselves. Conclusion. The events documented in this report represent a watershed moment in galactic military history. The systematic demonstration of human combat effectiveness using what they termed basic capabilities forced a complete re-evaluation of military doctrine across all allied species. The integration of human training methodologies has created military forces capable of operating effectively under conditions that would have been considered impossible before first contact with the Deathworld species. The continuing influence of human military philosophy extends far beyond tactical considerations, affecting how all species approach the development of individual and collective capabilities. The recognition that systematic conditioning can produce results that exceed technological enhancement has fundamentally altered the trajectory of galactic military evolution. The lesson of Kepler 442b remains as relevant today as it was during the original exercise. The most effective weapon against any enemy is the elimination of one's own weaknesses. This principle, embodied in the human philosophy that destroying the weak self creates invulnerability to external threats, has become the foundation for military development throughout the known galaxy. Document classification, restricted council eyes only. Distribution, authorized personnel, only next review date, Galactic Standard Year 2387, archive status, permanent historical record.